Hey guys, sorry about that. Didn't mean to be late, but when Windows 10 wants to crash, it will crash. Alright, so I'm gonna wait for some people to get in here and then we'll start. So how you guys doing today? Oh, Lawrence, how you doing? Alright, looks like we've got, well, not sure. So the stream is healthy, that's good. Got like 5 people in here, that's good. And I think we can start. Let me just check one more thing. Alright, so for the benefit of the people on YouTube who are probably watching this after the fact, and for anybody who's new to the stream, my name is Tensor, and we're going to be doing some Fluttery stuff today. Specifically, we're going to look at a package called Android Alarm Manager, and if we have some time, we're also going to go and look at another package called Flutter Local Notifications. I think that's what it's called at the least. It's an approximate name at the very least. Okay. Hey guys, so we've got Alexa, Arch, Robert, Robin, Zoaps, Neelish. How you doing? Few familiar faces, few new faces. It's great. Alright, so let's get into this. Before we get into the code though, I do want to kind of show you guys what we're dealing with. Let's see. Here we go. Let's move over to the browser real quick. So this is the Android Alarm Manager. This is obviously Android only, hence the name Android. So one of the big deals with Flutter is this idea that you're using a Flutter view, and when the application is closed and it's not in the window, you only get a certain amount of time to continue to do different computations and ping different services and stuff before everything just kind of goes into the background. And of course, this is not like a native application on either Android or iOS. For the most part with iOS, you can do very small computations while your app is in the background, though it is frowned upon. And with Android, you can do as much as you want, really, though there are some constraints, and we'll kind of talk about those later. Now, this package specifically allows us to interface with Android and go and basically spawn an isolate that is independent of our application, and that isolate can then do whatever we want it to. So it's basically just a big pocket of Dart code that we can execute at the most every 15 minutes after our application has gone out of the screen. Just so that you guys know though, I believe the Flutter team is working on a better solution than using like this particular library. One of the biggest problems is that iOS and Android do things completely differently as far as background services go. And so trying to find a common ground between the two is sort of difficult. They're working on essentially reseeding Flutter into the different platforms. And I'm assuming they're mainly doing this for the sake of desktop and web, but it's also got benefits for the mobile platforms as well. And one of the big benefits is that it will allow us to call background code in a way that's much more native and easy. Alrighty. So anyone got any questions thus far? Should be fairly straightforward. Yes, background fetch. So background fetch, I believe, is written by the guy who, one of the guys behind React Native, like he ported it over here. Let me come back here. So here's background fetch. This is another library. I didn't really include it today because I mainly wanted to touch on libraries that were a bit more mature. This is a fairly recent addition, and yeah, I've never really messed around with it, but it looks decent. It's likely it will also change though. And you can see here it also still has the same constraint where you can only call to the background every 15 minutes. So they basically do the same thing. This one, it's not specialized. Instead, it uses a headless implementation, whereas the other one also uses a headless implementation, and both presumably allow us to run Dart isolate in the background. But I'm also assuming that this one also works for iOS, perhaps. Anyway, I'm not going to worry about it. We'll just do with what we were planning to do, or what I was planning to do. Well, WhatsApp isn't a Flutter application, so they have full control over the Android API. Not that we don't in Flutter, it's just different. Like if you wanted to do something like WhatsApp, usually what you would have to do is actually write a bunch of Java or a bunch of Swift, depending on the platform that you're on. But because we're using Flutter, you can go ahead and use a plugin and then pass along a bunch of Dart that you want to execute. And so that kind of makes it a little bit easier on us as Flutter developers instead of just mobile developers. Alrighty, so what we're essentially going to do here is just kind of set up the plugin. There are a bunch of steps that we need to follow to get this thing started, so let's go ahead and get the imports and stuff. If I have some time, I will go back and take a look at this background fetch plugin, because seems like, yeah, having iOS on there is pretty nice. So I want this, and I think I'm going to want to bring in HTTP as well. So let me get the version on that. And I think maybe I want to bring in Android intent as well, which will allow us to specifically call an Android intent. So, and I think this is, let me see. There we go. Excuse me. All right, so we install them from our pubspec YAML, but we also have to modify the Android layer to make all this work. So we can go into Android, and well, first, it's always a good practice to make sure that your Android API can deal with Android X and Jetta files. So I'm going to say Android.enable Jettifier equals true. And then Android use Android X equals true. Probably shouldn't have spaces. I don't think that will really do much, but yeah, it's always a nice practice. I'm also going to update Gradle. So instead of 3.2.0, I'm going to go 3.0. And I think I'll bring in the Google GMS services. I think it's 4.2.0. I was just working with this earlier. It's not CMS, it's GMS. So these I think are optional, but the parts that aren't optional are modifying the Android manifest. And first we want to come in here and actually change our activity name or our application name. Change it to period application. And you'll see why we're doing this in a moment. Make sure that we've got the name of the project, which is just notification and alarm example. Then let's see. We're also going to need to bring in some permissions. So let me see. Let's see. This page actually has all the stuff I need, so I don't have to type them all out. They've got all of it on their own README, which makes this really easy. So you can just copy and paste them in. So we need the receive boot completed and the wake lock permissions. I'm also going to grab 2 other permissions. One for the internet, which I think we don't actually need, but why not? And then the other one is for the ability to set an alarm so that we can pass that back through our intent. And then, all right, in our activity, we need to define some of the actions that we're going to use with this. So they've got that also in their GitHub, so you can just copy and paste it over like this. That's a big old block of stuff. Mainly this is just binding to the activity that we're going to make. And let's go ahead and do that right now. So I'm going to come in here into com example and then the name of the application and make a new file here called application.java. And then I'm just going to copy and paste the code that they have over here. And hang on, before I do that, I'm going to need some imports. So need to name it the same thing that we have with our main activity. Then we need to import IO Flutter app, Flutter application, import IO Flutter plugin, common plugin, I think it's registry. Hang on, let me see if I can actually find it in their example. It'd be so much easier just to copy and paste it instead of actually writing it out. Let's see. So yeah, this basically, and I'll explain what this is doing here in a moment. Let me paste this in here. And then we've got the actual application code. So when your application terminates, the problem is that we have no way to register the Dart code with the background so that it will actually fire off. So what will happen is, like, you'll set up an event to happen in the future, but it won't know what to actually call to. So what we do here is we just override this register with function, which will then sort of fix that, because it will then allow us to specifically tell it what we want to put in that background service. And so that's what this entire setup is for, is basically just to add this little piece to our application so that it will actually be able to call to our isolate. All right, close all that. And I guess let's just test this, make sure it's working. So I'm going to call this up in the main app here, or in the main function rather. let's hang on. Let's bring in our dependency. That is not what I wanted. There we go. And the way that we call to this thing is by specifically initializing it and then telling it what we want it to do. And this can really be anything. Anything that you can put inside of a isolate, you can put inside of this handler. So we can go ahead and say, what is it? It's Android alarm manager initialize, and that will initialize it. And we want to, of course, await on this because it's a future. Passes back a boolean, but we don't really care about that. And then after we do that, we can call await Android alarm manager, and then we can fire off what we want. So we have two options here. We have one shot. This is a one-time item that will only happen, obviously once. And then we can set up a periodic background item. So periodic background item, we put in the duration that we want. So I'll make this seconds, but this is a really bad practice because, like I showed you guys before, Android only really lets you have one of these callbacks happen every 15 minutes. I'm only doing it for 10 seconds because we can do that in our development environment, but after a certain number of times it will stop working. Then we have an ID that we want to pass in for this background service, and I'm just going to call this 0 because it's simple. And then our callback needs to be a top-level function or a static function. So I can't just put an anonymous function in here. I have to actually write a function out. So let's see, I'm just going to say create a function here called callback, and then I'll just have it print, I don't know, I am in the isolates, and yeah, and then we'll just call it in here, so callback like that. There are a few more options you can add here. See, there's this few booleans here. We can tell it that we want it to execute at the exact moment, we want it to wake up the device, or we want it to continue to schedule or to continue to work through boots. So if a user turns off their device, these are still scheduled if we set that to true. I'm not going to mess with any of that because we're working on an emulator instead of an actual device. Alright, so let me open up the emulator here, and then we'll take a look and see if this works. It should be set up properly, I'm thinking. Alright, let's see what you guys are saying. Alexa says, I'm interested in foreground notification and how to get out of doze mode. You mean sleep mode through code? You could use this to get yourself out of sleep mode. So as I showed you, there is a boolean here that will wake up the device. If you set that to true, if the device is currently in standby, then it will automatically wake it up. And of course, the notification side of things is different. This is mainly just code running in the background, and in Android they call that API the alarm manager. So sort of like you're setting up alarms, but the reality is that you're just running code in the background. If you want to then issue a notification, you can create an Android intent using the Android intent library, or you can use the other library that I want to show you guys, which will pair up with this particular library and then actually issue a notification to your device. Let's see. The reason why my emulator is so slow is because I have it boot from cold boot. And the reason I had it turned off is because right before the stream it actually crashed my computer, so kind of taking a gamble here that it won't do that again. Let's see, let me turn that off and just wait for this to get up, and while I'm doing that I'll talk to you guys. OAuth 2.0? I've done some OAuth 2.0 in the past with other languages. Of course, it's certainly something I've thought about doing with Flutter. I don't have any specific tutorials in mind, but yeah, it's definitely something that I want to cover. I think there was a set of tutorials that I wanted to do where we had like a Go server and then a Flutter front end, and then the Go server issued OAuth tokens. I'll have to look back into that. I've got a whole list of things that I have written down that I actually can go and take a look at, but I'm not going to do that right now. All right, finally our emulator's up. We can run this program. We can take a look and see what's going on. And let me actually bring up the debug terminal because our print will happen in here. And let's see. There are a few other things that I'll show you when this actually gets running. What's my day job? I'm a freelance programmer / consultant. I work with a lot of different companies, doing different technologies. Mainly doing what I'm doing right now, showing you guys, showing people how to implement and use various technologies, and also doing it myself. Yeah, Neelish, you're right. In the actual devices, you do have to consider battery optimization and stuff like that. You can put logic for that type of thing in these background applications, and that's something that I would definitely recommend doing. Also using like some of the life cycle hooks would be great to initialize some of these background processes. No, you didn't miss much. We really just started about 15 minutes ago. Suggest a laptop. I don't know, man. It's been a while since I bought a laptop. And 70K, I guess you're asking in a different currency. I'm from the US, so I'm not really sure what you're asking for. You know, oh, wow, that crashed real fast. I guess, yeah, we've got a few tags that are not closing properly in our Android manifest. Let's see which ones they are. All right, so service closes, receiver closes, receiver closes. All right, let me see. Let me just check their example real quick. Oh, right, that's why. This needs to be on the outside of the activity. So out here, rather than inside. And yeah, that should fix it. So no wonder it was taking so long for Gradle to actually build this thing. Can you please stop spamming the chat? Otherwise I will have to put you in a timeout. I wouldn't really call it an alternative. I mean, it is sort of, but at the same time, you can use it in conjunction with FMC or FCM. All right, so Josh says that he's just finishing his internship, going to his final year of computer science. Flutter tutorials have helped him out. That's great. Oh yes, Neelish, you're absolutely right. Of course, I don't really, when I'm writing these tutorials, I don't really consider different flavors of Android. Anyway, so here we go. We've got a few little pieces that have already started. So you can see here it says starting alarm service, and then alarm service started. And then we've got our first printout, which says I am in the isolate. So we know that our isolate is running. And in fact, if we go to our debugger, you can see here that we actually have two main stacks running. One of them is the isolate and the other one is the actual app. This should print out again after 10 seconds, but sometimes it won't go that far because it's not really supposed to. Anyway, I'm not going to worry about it. It's not a big deal. All right, let's close this thing down. And let's actually apply it to something useful. One of the better uses for this type of thing is to make it so that you can pass intents for users, or make it so that maybe your application can update like an API while it's not on the screen. And of course, when you're doing something like that, you probably want to use the lifecycle hooks. Like for instance, when the application goes off the screen, you initiate an alarm that that will go off and maybe update your API. So what we'll do here, I guess, is create a small little call to an API. I'm going to use one of the fake APIs. I think the Swappy API, which is the Star Wars API. And we'll use that just for fake data. So I'll create a repository. The URL, I think, is, let me see if I can get it. And there we go. So it's called swappy.co, and we specifically want it in JSON format, like that. Let's bring in HTTP. And I guess we'll alias this. And all we're going to do is, we're not even going to serialize this thing. We're just going to have it push back a string. Because when you're talking between isolates, you really want to just pass back primitive types if you can do that. You don't really want to pass back big objects, because that can, generally that's not a good idea. So we'll parse our URL in this call, and then I'll take this response and just grab the body, which should be a string. All right, so now let's take this home page, and actually, you know what? I'm going to make a new widget that will sit inside of the home page. So let's just call this, I don't know, alarm widget. And let's convert it into a stateful widget. And what I want to do in here is define a receive port, which comes from the isolate library, which just got auto-imported, so that we can communicate with the actual isolate that's running in the background. So we'll create the receive port, and then we're calling to the planets branch of this API. So we'll create a list here. We'll call this planets, and we'll set it equal to an empty list. We also need init state here. And hang on, let me take the terminal off the, or not the terminal, the emulator off the screen so you guys can see more of it. The shortcuts that I'm using are control period. I think it was Elish who told me about it earlier in another stream. Somebody did. Neelish rather, not Elish. Somebody told me about it in another stream. If you see like a light bulb next to something in VS Code and you hit control period, it'll bring up this little context menu, and then you can just click the option that you want, which makes it a lot faster. It's pretty useful for changing widget types and adding a constructor to an object and stuff like that. Yes, we've already got our init state. Let's create a function here. We'll call this init isolate. And what we'll do here is we're going to use what's called the isolate name server, which comes from Dart UI, I believe. Yeah, Dart UI. And this will allow us to register a port name on our receive port so that we actually know which port is which, and so that we can actually communicate between our isolate and our actual application, even if the application refreshes. So I'm going to put a constant string up here, and this will be our port name. Just call this port name, and we can use that here, or we need to put the port name here, and then we need to put the send port side of the receive port here. So port, send port, like that. So we can check to see if we've registered this send port with this name, and if it comes back as false, then we'll throw an exception. So we'll throw unable to name port. That way we don't continue to actually do things after the fact. Also, we can call this indispose to remove the port name from our port. So we could say isolate name server, remove port mapping, and then we just put in the name, so port name, and this will take it off of the port. So each port can have only one name, and each port needs to have a unique name. And so doing it this way, we assure that when this state object in this widget gets destroyed, the port name gets detached from the port, even if the port still exists. Alright, so we want to call init isolate in here, in the init state function, and then I guess let's create some logic that will allow us to take the planets, the string that we're getting back, and convert it into a format that we can put into our list here. So just say jmap equals JSON decode, and I probably need to bring in Dart convert, put in our message, and then we're going to want to planets add all, and then we'll just call jmap results. I should probably show you guys what this JSON looks like, but basically it's a map, and then it's got the list of items after a key of results. So it's just fairly basic, fairly standard JSON. You guys can go look at it later if you want to. Anyway. So we've got most of this set up. We do need to set up the function that we're going to execute in our isolate though. So let's create that. I'm going to just call this isolate function, I guess, or we could call it isolate callback. It'll be asynchronous, and we need to set up our send port. This is just send port, and then we can call isolate name server to get the send port by the name that we gave it. That's just port name like that. And now we can then create a repository. And then we can just say string JSON equals await repo.call API, and then just pass it through the send port. So send port, we want to check to see if it's there, and just send the JSON on through. So this will execute in the background even when our application is out of the screen, and we can tell it when we want to deploy this, isolate and all that stuff to update our data. Of course, this isn't really going to matter that much for the data that we're actually looking at because it's all static. But if we had data that changed, maybe if we were looking at like a Firebase database, or if we were looking at like an API that maybe had like chat messages and stuff like that in it, this would be extremely useful. All right. So let me get rid of this here, and then let's build out the UI. So we have our center here. We then want to, I guess, embed this alarm widget in here. And then the alarm widget, let's start by, I guess let's start with a center, and then we'll create a stream builder in here. And the cool thing about our receive port side is that it's essentially just a stream. And so we can just use the stream builder to listen on it. So we can just, we're getting back strings, so we need a stream builder string type. And we can say stream, pass in the port, and well, we can then cast it like this, and now it's essentially just a stream because cast will convert it into a stream type, and now it should interface with our stream builder. And then we can actually set up the logic here. So just if snapshot has data, or rather doesn't have data, then we'll return a center. Actually, don't need a center because we're already in one. Circular progress indicator. Otherwise, we want to call, what was it, create planets. Pass in our snapshot.data. And then we'll return a list view builder. Or not a list view builder, but a list view. So and in here we can just say children equals our planets list map. Then we can just map on each of the planets and create a list tile with the data inside of them. So title, let's see, planet, what would it be? Let's get the name, subtitle, and let's get, I think they have population, and we'll just do that. That should be enough to sort of prove the point here, or to sort of show you guys what's happening here. We do want a button to make this work, so I'm just going to put this in the fab button, I mean the scaffold. So, and actually, yeah, we can do it in the fab. We'll need to make a void callback though. So I'm going to need to move this function, the isolate function, up there. And if I do that, that should be all right. So I'll just make this a global function, and then, yeah. We'll be able to call it from here. So floating action button, child, we'll call this icons alarm. Yeah, there. And then on pressed, make it asynchronous. And we can then just say await Android alarm manager initialize. And maybe we should put this in main. So await Android alarm manager dot let's make this periodic. We'll have a duration because this will be our initialization of the actual data. We'll make the duration 10 seconds again, give it an ID of 0, and then we can just call to our isolate function like that. And let me put this other thing up here. There we go. And yeah, that should do it. Let's see. Let's actually run this in the emulator now. And yeah, we'll take a look. So let me open the emulator. All right, I'm just reading through your guys' text. Could I, in theory, take an Android iOS package and write platform channels to use the function, or should I implement it myself in Dart and Flutter? Depends on what you're trying to implement, Josh. Let's see. Alt return for the class name. I'll have to look into that one. Yeah, I know about the what are they called? The snippets that you can use. What is my favorite database software to use? It depends on the use case. I tend towards NoSQL because I find relational databases to be a little bit painful sometimes, but it depends. Like I said, it depends on the use case because relational databases can be perfect for certain things, and yet at the same time, something like Datomic or like hell, using Prolog-based database, like a Datalog database, could be very useful. Hey there, I was wondering, do you know if you can do push notifications on Flutter without Flutter? Yeah, you can do push notifications, and in fact, we're going to get to that library here in a moment. Could you recap a bit of the logic you just implemented? Yes, give me a second. Let me actually run this thing, see if it actually works first. Let me check the debug console. So alarm service has connected and it's started. And let's see, after about 10 seconds, we should get our data in the window. Actually, that may not work because we forgot to call set state. So, well, actually we shouldn't have to call set state because we're inside of a stream builder. So in theory, this should work. Let's see. There we go, finally. All right, cool. So we've got our data, and it looks like just some of the data, so not all of it. There's supposedly like 60 planets in here. So I'm assuming that when it goes and it calls again, it'll go and get the rest of the planets. And it'll just keep populating the list, or maybe it'll just keep adding more of the same items to the data, or to the list rather. So I'm just going to leave it here for a moment, and then I'll come back to it and see what happens. And while I'm doing that, let's go over some of this logic for you. Alright, so we've got the basic Flutter setup. At the very top, we've got this await Android Alarm Manager initialize. This is where we're initializing the plugin so that we can run all this stuff in the background. Then, of course, we've got a stateless widget, all pretty straightforward. Down here, though, we've got our floating action button, and then we are actually calling out to the background code, which is just an isolate that we're spawning. And we're spawning it via this function here, the isolate function. And basically, you can think of the isolate function like an entry point for this isolated process. So it's like the main function of the isolated process. Everything that's written in it will be done in a sequential order, like, because it's procedural code. And so we get our send port, which is the receive port, the end of the receive port from the port down here. And then we call to the repo object. We then call API, and then we send the JSON string along the send port back to the receive port here. Then down in the widget, this is all fairly straightforward. Receive port, a list of planets, which is just a list of JSON maps essentially. And then we have our init isolate, which is just checking to see if we can name the send port with a port name so that all of our isolates know where this port is supposed to be and where it's supposed to be coming from. We can also dispose of that same name, so because we can only have one unique name. And then create planets down here just takes the JSON string and then turns it into our list. And then the rest of it is fairly straightforward. It's just a matter of taking that JSON, unwrapping it in the right way, and then creating list tiles inside of our list view. Let's see if we have more data. You can see here we actually have doubled the data because it called to the same API and then just doubled up our string. So this is all happening in the background. I'm not actually doing anything to make it run. Just that one button click was enough to get it started. So you could probably see how this would be very useful, especially for data that is changing over time. If your app goes out of the screen, like for instance, if I just go to the home screen, this should still be running in the background, just no matter what, unless I go ahead and turn off the device. Alrighty. If the app is in the background, how is the fab accessed? The fab doesn't need to be accessed. You only need to click the fab the one time to initialize that isolate. The rest of it is just, it's just running already. And it's running because what happens is the Java code executes it, and then it's essentially just a headless application that's every 15 minutes it wakes up, it calls to the Dart code executes, and then it goes back to sleep, and then it just keeps doing that over and over again. And of course ours is doing it every 10 seconds rather than every 15 minutes, but it's not precise because we're not really supposed to schedule it that many times. So, and that's why we're not seeing it just populate with a ton of data right now. Alrighty, so that's it for this. I'm going to take this entire app and just put it into a different file and then commit it over to GitHub. Let's see. Let's just call this background.dart. I'll just paste it in here, and then let's send all this over. And if you guys want to take a look at the code, you can obviously go to the GitHub repository that's in the description of this live stream. Okay, so I just realized that we never used the Android intent library. Well, whatever. That's not a big loss. It's a pretty straightforward library, and it's It's only really useful if you want to spawn a custom intent, but for the most part there are plugins to do the things that you can do with intents. Anyway, so we're going to go and look at the other plugin. So let me pull that up. It is called Flutter Local Notifications. So let me get over to the browser. So this is a library we're going to take a look at. There is a bit of setup here like we had with our other library. And there are various different notifications that we can set up. We can set up a specific time. We can set up to have it repeat over and over again. And again, this uses background code. So once you've scheduled the notification, it should appear later down the line. Anyway, so let's see. Got to get some of this stuff, put it into our code. Let me go back to the actual editor here, and I'll take off the emulator. And let's see, I think some of this should already be in our pub spec, or our manifest rather. Let's see. Yeah, we've already got that permission. We need to add another receiver here. And this one actually is the same as this one here, except it's got a different receiver name. So it's got the same intent filter, but a different receiver. If we want to display the scheduled notifications, we need this other receiver too. And let's see. If we want to make our phone vibrate, we can also add that permission too. And I think that should be it. As far as setting up Android. Yeah, that looks to be all right. All right. And I think this should also work with iOS just out of the box. There are a few things that you want to do with iOS, obviously, but you know, we'll actually look over those as we're doing them. One of the other things we want to do is actually get an icon. So let's see. We could probably just use this icon and put this in drawable, because we need an icon to attach to our notification. Let me get the smallest one here. That'd probably be this one here. Just copy this over. Let me rename it back to what it was called. So yeah, when you have a notification that appears, you want that notification to have you know, a piece of or an image on it to indicate that it's from the application that you're working with. And so yeah, that's what that's for. Anyway, so let me clean this up. I'm just gonna get rid of all this other stuff. And I guess we'll remove this and remove this. And we'll make this just a container. And I guess we'll remove this and get rid of these for now. And this. Now, before I get going, let's see if we have any more questions. Got a lot of foreign languages that I can't speak, unfortunately. Sorry, guys. I only speak English and a little bit of Japanese. How can I hide the icon of my app in Android? I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Do you mean have like an app that doesn't have an icon? Or do you mean like while you're in your application, you're not seeing the icon? I'm not really sure what you mean, so give me more details and I can try to answer it for you. All right. Oh yes, we forgot to bring in our dependency. So let me get that. So this is just Flutter local notifications. Well, Flutter local notifications, and then the version number is this version right now. And while I'm at it, I'm going to take these and comment them out. But we might need HTTP, so I'll leave that one in. Let's see. All right, well. So let's go ahead and just implement this fairly simply so that we know it works. So we're going to need our local notifications, is what it's called. And then we can actually set it up. So let's do this in main. Should just be local notifications. Oh, Flutter local notifications plugin dot and then we create a so we're creating an object here. Then we can use this object to do various things. So we can say we can set up Android. Let's see. Let's see. So in here we have initialize. I think we call that last. Instead, we want to call and create a new Android setting object. Or it's Android initialization settings. I'm not sure why I'm not getting auto completion. Then we put in the name of the launcher application, or the launcher picture that we had, which is just IC launcher. And then for iOS, we have the same thing. So we could say initialize iOS equals, and then it's just iOS initialization settings. And for this one, I don't think you have anything specific that you have to put in here, but you do have a bunch of different options you can put in here. So you can you have all these different booleans. So you can have it play a sound, you can have it be silent, you can present a badge, you can request sound permissions and stuff like that. With the Android notification, it's just the icon. So now we can go ahead and connect these two. So that's what it should be called. I spelt it right. All right, and we just put in our Android and then iOS objects. And then we can call the initialize function with the Flutter notifications plugin object. So just and for this we pass in the initialize settings that we just created here, and then that initializes our ability to send out a notification. So now let's make it so that we can actually send out a notification. So what I'm going to do is just add a let's add some text to this application. So, and then we'll put in our fab, and we'll use the floating action button to launch our notifications. So I guess that's whoops. And then on pressed, we'll make a function to put in here, and I'll make the function down here. So it's going to return a future, and I'm going to call it single notification, and we want to pass in a date time. We also want to pass in a string message, and then I guess we could pass in some subtext, the hash code, and then a sound if we want one. I can make this sound optional. Let me do that. And if I'm going to make this static, let's just make it a top level function. Alright, so we've got to set up some platform channel specifics. So let's just call it Android channel. And this is just a Android notification details object. And in here we specify, well, let's see, specify the channel ID, the channel name, then the channel description for sending all this. And it's got a ton of different options. You can see, wow, that's quite a lot. So we can manipulate like the LED lights. We could have it vibrate, make sounds, have different colors, just a ton of different stuff. It's kind of cool. So channel ID is just going to be, let's just call it channel ID. Then the channel name, and then the channel description. Just do it like that. And then the rest of this stuff, I guess we could put in our sound if it's here. So sound. We don't actually have a sound, so I'm not really going to worry about that. Let's remove it for now. And maybe if you guys want to hear a sound, I'll put in a sound later. We can also specify the importance. So there's an importance enum that we can use for this. Importance. Let's make it max. And then a priority that we can also do, which is also a priority enum. So let's give it max again. Now for the iOS side, let's call this iOS. Well, iOS channel's fine. It's iOS notification details, so same type of object as the Android one. This one has a lot fewer settings, so we can only really set up an alert, present a badge, present a sound, or just put in the sound. I'm just going to leave it empty, and then we can set up notification details, which are just platform in specific ones. So just call this platform channel. So notification details, then we pass in our Android channel, and then our iOS channel, like that. And let's see, is there anything else? No, that's it. And then we want to use our Flutter local notifications plugin to schedule the actual thing, the notification. So let me hang on. Let's just pass this in here. Or no, you know what? We'll just create a new one. So or no, we need this here, the plugin object. So we actually need this one. Let me pass it through here. I'm gonna pass it all the way through main and all the way down here. So this is what it's called. So then we can just use control period again, make the constructor, and we can pass it through my home page as well. You guys probably shouldn't do things like this. Like, it's really not advisable to have an object and pass it through like your entire widget tree like this, but whatever. This is a really small app, so I don't really care. And then we'll pass it into our function here. Let me put it in the front. So now we can just call to our plugin, and we can just go ahead and call schedule. We pass in an ID, which will be the hash code. Let's see, hash code, title. Let's make that the message. Body will be the subtext. Schedule date will be the date time. And then the notification details are our platform channel. And we can also put in, let's see, there's also a payload that we can put in here. So the payload can just be our hash code toString, for instance. Alrighty, so now we can go ahead and just call this in our floating action button. So let's see, await single notification, and let's make this asynchronous. We're going to need to specify a date time first, so date time, let's just call this now equals date time dot now. Let's make it UTC time. It seems like my analyzer is slowing down yet again. It's really annoying. And then let's see, we'll pass in our plugin. And now, and let's put in our message, which would be notification. This is a notification. The hash code will just be an integer, so whatever, just put an integer in there. And then sound we'll just leave empty. Alright, so that looks about right. Let's go ahead and run this and see if it works. Well, alright, we have some errors. Let me debug those real quick. So apparently it's not finding the URI for this for some reason. Let me make sure it's imported properly. Oh, I know what it is. It's the background that's giving me errors. So let me just comment all this out. You can do that with control / just highlight some code and just do that. Anyway. Alright, so now we can run this thing. You want to hide the launcher in the Android launcher. These are local notifications. You can obviously push a notification into your application and then push it using local notifications as well. So it could be used for both, one or the other. Yeah, just crashed. I'm not really sure why. Let me see. All right, So it looks like it has to do with the stuff that we set up that doesn't exist anymore. So let me go ahead and just remove that stuff. Or actually, you know what would be easier is just to keep our import on the Android Alarm Manager. Because all this is if you've ever noticed, I don't know if you guys have ever looked inside of this IO folder, but any plugins you have in your application will have generated register with calls inside of them. So you can see here, this is all a generated file. And we have our Android Alarm Manager plugin and then the Flutter local notifications plugin. And they're both being registered in the Java side of things. And so since we didn't have this imported, it was getting confused because it didn't know what the hell it was. All right. Also, when in doubt, you can always run Flutter clean. That'll help too. Yeah, as I was saying, I'm not really sure how you can hide your icon on Android. I'm sure there is a way though. Generally, you want the icon to be there. I can't really think of a use case where you wouldn't want it. I mean, unless you're trying to have like an app that you don't want the user to know is installed on their application. In that case, I would just make a partial app that doesn't even have an icon. But yeah. If you don't supply an icon with Flutter, if you don't supply an icon, it will automatically give you the Flutter icon. But if you don't supply an icon with a normal Android app, I don't think it will default to something else. Sam Wong says, Lei Shi Hayo, which I guess means hello teacher, according to Google Translate, which is interesting. I don't speak much Chinese, and I'm not sure if that's Cantonese or Mandarin. All right, so our application is open. Looks like we've got some kind of issue here. So it says that the initialize function was caused on null, which shouldn't be the case. Maybe I should bring these downwards. In fact, that's probably what we're going to have to do, rather than piping them through the entire tree. I'll just turn this into a stateful widget and I'll put it in this. And let's see. Just let's see. Make a function like this, and then we'll call it inside of init state. All right, so that should do it. Perhaps. We'll see. Let me close this out. Seems to be another error somewhere. All right, because now we're trying to get the plugin. The plugin's not called plugin anymore. It's called the local notifications plugin. And yeah, this should be at the very least declared out here. All right, let's see. If I reset this thing, will it actually show up? Again, we're getting issue with initialize. All right, so I need to find out why that's happening. I'm pretty sure I walked through this pretty self-explanatory. I don't know. Maybe there's a step I missed. So it's the initialize function here. Okay, I see. I probably want to call await here. There we go. Alright, so that solved the problem. The problem was that it was just running before everything else was set up. And yeah, it's usually not a good thing. So let's see if we can get our notification. Alright, and before we do that, what we want to do is actually add some time here. So when we call the button, let's add 5 seconds to it so it gives it 5 seconds before it posts the notification. Alright, let's give this a shot. And seems like we've got some kind of error here, but do we have a notification up there yet? Let's see, what's this saying? Method schedule was called on null. Okay. So problem is that alright, so what I'll do is rather than passing in the plugin like this, I'll just directly call on the notification plugin. And I'm going to need to bring this function, put it right inside of this object. We'll make it static. And let's not make it static. And let's see, we'll make it asynchronous while we're at it. That way it'll have some time to actually wait for this to call. And then, yeah. Didn't make sense to call wait on a function that wasn't asynchronous. Alright, let's try again. Looks like we're already getting errors, but it's fine. Let's see. You know what it might be? Maybe I do have to initialize this thing before I even call any of this stuff. Something like that. If it's that simple, I'm going to be kind of mad. Yep, it's that simple. Alright. So now it's sending the notification back. And there's our notification, including some sound. And I guess it uses the default sound if we don't specify a sound, which is fine. And it seems to take about 5 seconds to pop up, which is cool. Alrighty, so that's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do. And Neelish was perfectly right. I should have looked at the chat. Yeah, sometimes I get a little overzealous and I don't actually initialize the object, and then that causes problems. Yes, a keylogger app. Yeah, there are ways to hide icons. Just Google hide app icon, you'll find tons of ways to do that. Anyway. Alright, so I think... Am I not showing the emulator? Huh. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I thought I was. Alrighty, so... let me reset this thing. And yeah, there we go. So just simple app. Click on the fab, wait about 5 seconds, and then we'll have a notification pop. There we go. And I'm not sure if you probably can't hear the noise it's making. It's making just a normal notification noise. Let me add the audio input for my computer just temporarily so that you can hear it. Let's see. That is not the one I wanted. audio output. There we go. All right, so you should, in theory, be able to hear this now, though I'm not sure. Maybe very loud too. Wait about 5 seconds. I don't know if you guys heard it. Anyway, I tried. All right, good. So the effort was worth it. So yeah, all right, and I think so. You can see here you actually have the little Flutter icon sitting in the top. That's the icon that we specified, and when you pull it down, you have the text for the notification. So it says notification. This is a notification. We can click on the notification, and if we had some kind of action built into the notification, it would do something. Maybe open the app. Like for instance, if I fire the notification, close the app, it should still pop up. Yeah, there we go. So you can see it does still work in the background, and then when I click the notification, by default, I guess it opens the app. So yeah, it sort of uses all that background stuff that we were looking at before, but it's less involved in this case. If you combine these two widgets together, or these two libraries together, you can do a lot of really cool things. So I would recommend you guys check that out. Yeah, that would be silent because I just killed the input. Mainly because my computer can get pretty noisy and I don't really want that coming through on the stream all the time. I've got a lot of voice chat software open up in the background, and Skyping, people Skyping in, people Discording in, Slacking in, all that stuff. It's really annoying. Alright guys, well I'm going to call it for today. I guess we've been going for about an hour and a half, which seems like a good place to stop. We've only been going for about an hour, and that's fine. I really didn't want to overdo it this time like we did in the last two streams. 2-hour streams is a bit too much for me, especially if we're going to do 3 in a row like this. If you guys have any questions though, go ahead and ask them and I'll answer them if I can. And of course, they don't have to be about this, they can be about whatever. Of course, all of the code here will be on GitHub, and I'll make sure that that happens right now. So just go ahead and commit all this stuff. The background file should be all, should still be commented out, but it'll be all right. I'm sure you guys can figure out what to do with it. I think in the future I'll probably do something more complicated with these two libraries, and I'll definitely be looking at background fetch as Neelish suggested. It is a pretty cool library. I didn't realize that it worked with iOS, and that's why I didn't actually look at it, because it was like, oh, this is basically the Android library. But yeah. You can launch the app without the head. I actually just showed that. Well, in theory I didn't. Let me see. So let me, here we go. I'm going to go ahead and make this like 10 seconds, and then I'm going to kill the app after I click the button. So let's see. Click the button, kill the app, and let's see. We should still get our notification, and clicking it will open the app from start. So it actually did open the app from cold, even though it's not showing that well. Probably because it's not hot reloaded anymore. So yeah, it's trying to load an app that doesn't exist. So yeah, that did open the app. I just moved it to 10 seconds so I'd have more time to kill the app. It would still show after 5 seconds if I left it that way. If you schedule a notification, it will happen roughly in the time that you've scheduled it in. Android is not exact. It's never exact about its notifications. And if you're scheduling a lot of notifications, then you're going to have to abide by the whole 15-minute rule, which means that you can't just schedule like thousands of notifications and have them come in every second or whatever. You have to make it so that they are spread apart by 15 minutes. And even if you're using multiple apps, all of them scheduling notifications at the same time, you can only have so many on both Android and iOS. I think iOS it's only like 140 notifications at once, and then like Android's like 1,000 something, but it's still pretty limiting in that regard. I could actually look it up. I'm not really sure what it is. Anyway, I'm not going to worry about it. It's something that maybe we could talk about at some other point. Anyway, I appreciate you guys all coming out for this live stream, and I hope you guys enjoyed the content. Abu, I hope you didn't just come in, because this is actually literally the end of the live stream. But you know what? You can watch it on YouTube in like a moment when after it's turned off, so should be all right. No, thank you, Neelish. All right, guys. Well, I'll see you guys next time. Probably do it another next week. Not Monday, but probably like Tuesday or Wednesday. Probably be the next live stream. I'll definitely have an Elixir tutorial out on Monday, and I'll probably do another video on Tuesday if I don't do a live stream. So